Hi, you all saw the title of this video, so brew some tea, maybe pick up some snacks, and let's get into this long one. I am Jaru, I enjoy all types of narrative-driven games, and today I will be talking about one of my favorite video games of all time, The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, which falls short in various aspects, I'm afraid. From lackluster combat mechanics to writing choices that can only be described as the definition of mediocrity, Skyrim hasn't aged that well in my eyes. Well, nowadays this seems to be a common opinion among us gamers. Skyrim is widely known as that one game which requires mods and patches to make it somewhat playable, so it is no surprise that Skyrim mods have billions of downloads all across the internet. Video game enthusiasts have also dichotomized several aspects of Skyrim in thousands of different analysis videos that you can find on YouTube. Yet, having personally found interest in a further in-depth discussion that I could bring out to the table, today I will only focus on a handful of topics that I personally found interesting to discuss. Those being 3 storytelling facets that Skyrim brings to the table. While we discuss those story beats, I will provide my own conclusive thoughts on each moral dilemma, explain Skyrim's narrative on a deeper level, scrutinize several characters brought up throughout Skyrim's main quest, as well as criticize writing choices that Bethesda's writers decide to go with. If that is something you find intriguing, then hop on board. Although if for some reason you haven't played Skyrim yourself and care about spoilers, now would be a good time to click off. I will spoil the living shit out of Skyrim, and I am not afraid to talk about topics from earlier or later Elder Scrolls titles either. Now all that out of the way, shall we begin? I will start with dissecting the Civil War. While it is often described that there are 2 sides to the war, I would argue that there are 3 to 4, if you want to be a bit silly and add Forsworn into the debacle. First 2 being the Empire of Tamriel and the Stormcloak Rebellion obviously, with the 3rd participant being the Talmor, the Aldmeri Dominion's secret service. As many of you know, Skyrim takes place in the 4th era, a whole 202 years after the events of Oblivion. Much has transpired since then. The Oblivion crisis heavily affected the Empire's status as the global superpower. Firstly, the bloodline of Dragonborn emperors perished following the deaths of Uriel and Martin Septim. Subsequently, Cyrodiil's empire has been progressively weakened on a yearly basis by all types of catastrophic events. Arguably, the most significant of these events was the rise of the 3rd Aldmeri Dominion, which asserted itself as the strongest military nation in Tamriel. The Aldmeri Dominion continuously revoked worldwide influence from the Empire, freeing Elsewhere and Valenwood from imperial rule. Diplomatic divide eventually erupted into the Great War 30 years ago. The war was disastrous for both sides, with the war ending in a militaristic stalemate. However, High Elves of the Aldmeri Dominion gained an upper hand strategically as the peace treaty White Gold conquered that heavily suited Alinor's liking. In the aftermath, worship of Talos was disallowed, Southern Hammerfell was given to Aldmeri Dominion, and the Blades were disbanded. After the Great War, Ulfric Stormcloak, the son of the Jarl of Windhelm at the time and a former Imperial Legion veteran, established a militia under his name. With the assistance of the Talmor, he managed to occupy the hold of Reach from the newly established kingdom of the Reachmen. Ulfric sought to reinstate the worship of Talos in Markarth, which ended Ulfric's cooperation with the Talmor and also created a rift between Ulfric's camp of Stormcloaks and Cyrodiil, ultimately resulting in the Skyrim Civil War between Nords and Imperials. Now, it is no secret that Ulfric used the ban on Talos' worship as a scapegoat to build up his own rebellion from scratch. See, Nords are often considered hot-blooded individuals to the core who prefer to use force over negotiation or magic in a given situation. This has given them a reputation of being stoic and somewhat nationalistic towards their heritage. But perhaps they are slightly misunderstood. Nords respect one's drive to have a deeper purpose in life, living as a warrior, working hard towards everyday needs and striving to be stronger both mentally and physically. This is the very reason why the most important god of Nords, Ysmir or Talos, is so liked within the Nordic population. Talos, also known as the Great Tiber Septim, was the first Dragonborn emperor for the United Tamrielic Empire led by the Septim family. He represents the idea of a perfect human in the eyes of Nords. Not only was he strong physically, but he was also the person who united all nations of Tamriel into one. This is why Nords consider the ban on Talos' worship as an attack against Nordic culture. It is also common in Skyrim to hear gossip about the mythical return of a Dragonborn, as if Talos reincarnated in modern day to stop the dragon threat. From Talmos's point of view, Tiber Septim was a mistake that allowed the current empire of Tamriel to even exist to begin with. To High Elves, Talos was just a man, not a god. In their terms, believing in Talos is a heresy and should be removed from Nirn as soon as possible, which understandably so has concerned Nords, and could even be one of the main reasons for Ulfric's racial prejudice, but that's a topic for later. Either way, Ulfric wished to become the High King of Skyrim. In his eyes, the Empire had become no less than a puppet state of the Aldmeri Dominion. By liberating Skyrim from the rule of the Empire, he would re-establish the ancient kingdom of Skyrim, therefore charge a counterattack against the Aldmeri Dominion by dispelling elves from the country and allowing Talos' worship once more. In order to make this dream happen, he murdered the current High King of Skyrim, Turg, allegedly by only using his bare voice. This is all just Imperial propaganda, as he won against Turg in a duel fair and square, but it is no secret that Ulfric was indeed a trainee of the Greybeards at younger age and has a capability in the way of the voice. However, sheer hubris got into his head and he was captured in an Imperial ambush alongside some other Stormcloak soldiers. This ambush was orchestrated by General Tullius, an Imperial general, who managed to successfully accomplish such an operation just a few months after arriving in Skyrim. The war seemed to be over on a whim, with order re-established in the province of Skyrim. If it weren't for a miracle. That's where Skyrim starts up. Our character, whom I will call Draco and use he/him pronouns for now, tried to cross the border illegally and was somehow trapped in the crossfire. Now he and several other people are sent to their execution, which takes place in Helgen. Our player getting ambushed seemingly in the same operation as Ulfric did is a plot hole on its own, but I won't really go that deep into it as that's besides the point of this video.
Oh hell no, fuck that. I changed my mind. Hello, this is post-edit Ajaru here, and I'm here to discuss about this issue. See, Ulfric Stormcloak and his army were caught in an ambush by Tullius' troops near Darkwater Crossing. That's here. I would imagine that at first they were sent to be executed at the Imperial City. However, since General Tullius wanted to execute Ulfric Stormcloak ASAP, their carriage was redirected to Helgen. Helgen likely being the nearest village near the Cyrodiil-Skyrim border, with execution equipment and enough population to witness Ulfric's execution that would spread the story of Ulfric's death like wildfire. I do mention the reasoning for Tullius' decision later down the line in this video, so I won't go any further with this as of now. However, that isn't even what I'm after here. As said, Draco was seemingly caught in a crossfire during the Imperial Cis ambush operation, so was Lokir, the horse thief from Rorikstad. However, Ralof specifically states that us, or well, Draco, walked right into that Imperial ambush, that being the military operation where Ulfric was caught near Darkwater Crossing. However, as Draco was illegally trying to cross the border, then how was he even caught in the same ambush? Did Imperials have soldiers all over Skyrim's borders in case any Stormcloaks managed to escape the ambush? Perhaps. Since otherwise Draco would have had to walk directly to Darkwater Crossing, which may I add is quite far away from the border. Not to forget that obviously the entirety of Skyrim is heavily downscaled for the sake of optimization and gameplay in mind. After all, Skyrim was a PS3/Xbox 360 era game. Damn, saying that made me feel like a dinosaur. Which means that in canon Darkwater Crossing is probably as far from Cyrodiil as Birmingham is from Northampton, which is around 18 hours away by foot. And those who care, I decided to jog all the way from Darkwater Crossing to Helgen, which in game took a whopping... just Oh, just 3 hours. Alrighty then. Well, regardless, my point here is that the Darkwater crossing is quite far away. Unless Draco purposely ran directly towards Darkwater crossing in order to seek supplies or whatnot, the only way he could get caught is if Imperials were actively protecting the Cyrodiil-Skyrim border. I mean, why would Imperials really care if he came from Morrowind, you know? Anyway, in that case, he wouldn't get caught in the same skirmish, and likely would be sent to Bruma for further interrogation, or at least wouldn't be listed in the same carriage as Ralof and Ulfric were. That is, if he didn't somehow try to cross the border just as the execution carriage was on its way to Helgen, in which case that would be very unlucky, and Ralof likely wouldn't mention how Draco was caught in the same Imperial ambush as him and Ulfric. The only realistic way this situation could play out is if Draco was either a known criminal within the previous place they lived in, be it Cyrodiil or Morrowind, or he was chased by the Imperial Legion after crossing the border and unfortunately came across Tullius's troops during his escape route. In any other explanation, this whole dilemma just comes off as a plot hole that was left in the game so that players can come up with their own backstory for their character, which is fine and dandy, but even then, my take here is just a headcanon, and what we are left with are just clues for an interesting backstory that coming across as choppy and filled with questions in the end. Especially concerning the morality of the Imperial Legion, as anyone could easily note that both Draco and Lokier weren't part of the Stormcloaks and therefore probably shouldn't be beheaded in the same ceremony as Ulfric and his men, who are quite literally prisoners of war. Anyhow, let's return to the main video, shall we? But as we know, the 9 Divines decided to grant Draco the thickest plot armor imaginable, and a rare dragon appears out of nowhere. Draco and the other prisoners like Ulfric Stormcloak managed to escape the hellhole we know as Helgen in one piece, and the civil war is back on. So now you may wonder, which side you should pick at the start of the game, where you get to choose between picking Hadvar, a Nord fighting for the Imperials, or Ralof, a Nord fighting for Stormcloaks. Well, it doesn't matter in the slightest whether the player selects Hadvar or Ralof, as Helgen's Keep is designed to be a tutorial dungeon which teaches players gameplay mechanics. Only thing this decision actually affects is the loot variety and a difference between the people whom Draco can meet up with in Riverwood. But even then, I find this decision intriguing. First of all, the fact that we even have to choose is rather ludicrous. Think about it. Holy shit, we are literally in an emergency that no other mortal has been in. A dragon, a creature from fairy tales and folklore, has appeared in front of you, destroyed Helgen in process, and therefore a national emergency should be declared. Sure, at this point no one knows that this dragon just happens to be the baddest of them all, but surely even a sight of dragons should warrant a momentary ceasefire at the very least. To any sensible humanoid, the security of civilians should realistically be the main priority here, and there were loads of civilians at Helgen. For instance, Draco, while now being a criminal fugitive, is still just a civilian. But nah, fuck it. Right after the player chooses their side, we have a 10-minute long gameplay tutorial where we get to massacre loads of people depending on our side of choosing, as if the raging civil war was more important than possibly the biggest disaster on Tamriel since the eruption of the Red Mountain. Realistically speaking, this is exactly how I would imagine medieval wars to turn out if mythical beasts like dragons were to exist. The opponents of the war would use any situation, no matter how devastating, to their advantage to gain a decisive upper hand in the war. This depiction of medieval warfare shows from a very early on how fucked up war can be and how disgusting humans can act under certain circumstances. It is even more terrible once you stop and actually think about what you go through in Helgen's Keep. Torturers, dead people, mentions of people left to scream for weeks before the eventual starvation. Both sides of this war are absolutely sickening people, and I cannot support either of them in my right mind. That being said, from Draco's moral standpoint, Ralof is a better choice. Yes, Hadvar has been nothing but nice throughout the prologue, and in the end he was just doing his job. Him telling Draco to get on the chopping block was just another day in the office for him, and there was nothing that he could have done to prevent it. And in the end, it doesn't matter. Friends, work or romance, just being nice isn't a key to everything. I mean, Ralof was also nice towards Draco from the very beginning, and that's not the reason why I'm picking him here. You have to remember that Draco was sentenced to a decapitation for a relatively minor crime. Later on into the game, you will receive a 1.6k bounty for attempting to kill the Emperor's body double, but you can just shrug that off with a relatively minor prison sentence. I would imagine that attempting an assassination on the Emperor, body double or not, should justify a similar sentence as what Ulfric Stormcloak got, a person who had killed the High King of Skyrim. Doing something as minor as crossing the border, illegal or not, should most likely not prompt the death penalty, even in the world of Tamriel. Since Skyrim is a role-playing game, players are free to select their own backstory for their characters. The game itself doesn't provide any for the player. This is why most players probably have their own headcanon towards how and why the player attempts crossing the border. With headcanon in mind, you could say that Draco was Stormcloak aligned from the beginning, or maybe he was even an Imperial spy and wasn't actually going to be executed. But from canon perspective, Draco was captured by Imperials and sentenced to death. That's it. For this fact alone, Draco should not trust the Empire or the Imperials a whole 5 minutes after he was miraculously saved from death. This is why, regardless of the choice's importance or lack of it, picking Imperials at the start of the game honestly amuses me. But it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, as like I said, it doesn't affect the game at all, and you get to pick your side later on, so which side actually has a better claim to winning the civil war in Skyrim? Right off the bat, we need to discuss a certain subject, that being whether Ulfric Stormcloak or even General Tullius are racist, as this is often used as a point in one's argument whether you should support one side or another. Let's start with General Tullius. I have grown to like General Tullius. He may come off as someone who doesn't respect anything other than the Emperor and the province of Cyrodiil. He seemingly doesn't really know anything about Nordic tradition, being an Imperial, and neither does he particularly care about them. However, in my opinion, Tullius is a great man, and someone who has earned my respect. He wants to end the war fast in order to save as many lives as possible and to move focus on dealing with the Aldmeri Dominion instead of dealing with some silly internal politics. And if the player sides with the Imperials, he will comment at the end of the Civil War storyline on how he has come to respect both Nords and Skyrim. Tullius may not be born as a Nord, but he does respect a good warrior like a traditional Nord. So when compared to Ulfric, who is just a walking red flag, I would say that Tullius would obviously win in terms of trustworthiness 100-0 against Ulfric. And when it comes to Ulfric, well, people who argue that he is a racist have a very valid point. Firstly, while it's pretty common for Kashyyyts to not be able to access any types of cities due to a racial stereotype of them selling illegal merchandise or attempting to scam their customers, Ulfric doesn't let them be even near Windhelm. This is most likely due to Ulfric attempting to stop the black market of skooma and other drugs being sold within the dark alleys of Windhelm. However, I don't think that a slight reduction in drug usage is a good enough reason to close an entire race out of the city, especially since, as is often the case in our world, once something is banned from the public, the odds of black market and trafficking happening increases by a mile. Next, many Dunmer refugees that came to Skyrim after the Red Year and an Argonian invasion were sent to a place called Snow Quarter, which is at this point has a minority dark elf community. However, Snow Quarter has since been dubbed as Grey Quarter, and I probably don't need to explain how this is blatantly racially motivated. Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak provides zero support for this Dunmeri minority group and instead forces them to live in Snow Quarter, leaving poor dark elves no choice but to either accept the offer or leave the city entirely. The same situation applies to the small Argonian community that is forced to live outside the city walls at the Argonian assemblage. While there have been arguments, even made by Dunmeri themselves, that maybe those dark elves are too proud to move outside of the Snow Quarter, it is still something to discuss about, because Ulfric is supposed to help all of his citizens in Windhelm, being the Jarl, but he seems to heavily favor Nords. That being said, he hasn't thrown Aldmeri or Dunmeri out of the city, and is allowing non-Nords to practice their businesses in the city. That being said, while there are no right or wrong answers,
I would say that, yeah, Ulfric is not the best person. I mean, seriously, when a man allows part of his city to get renamed over a racial remark, you don't really have any defense on your behalf. That being said, Ulfric is not the most racist character in the game. That trophy goes to Talmor Justiciars. Which is why I'm not gonna use the Ulfric is a racist card as a way to resolve whether you should pick Imperials or Stormcloaks, as there are many other cons to Ulfric's behavior that we will discuss right now. See, Skyrim Civil War is a topic that has been one of the biggest talking points about Skyrim for 10 years. You'll find both Stormcloak defenders and Empire enjoyers from all corners of the internet and beyond, and it is almost impossible to come up to a conclusive point which side is better than the other. This is obviously a purposeful design aspect from Bethesda's end, as it helps in creating decade-long discussions that expands the game's lifespan by a mile. But today I will try my best and give some sort of answer to this conundrum, even if it can't serve as a conclusive or canonical answer, as the Bethesda is the one who decides on this factor once they release a sequel to Skyrim, and we all learn who the true canonical winner was in this conflict. Just remember that as of now, there are no canonical winners. You could consider whoever wins the Civil War on your own game save as the canonical winner, and you would be as right as someone who supports the opposite side. These thoughts I'm sharing in this video are purely my own and are based on facts and logic provided in the game. Just because I told you that X side should be the winner doesn't mean that you should blindly follow my thesis on the matter, but rather come to your own conclusion based on what you believe. This applies to all of my current videos as well as any that I may or may not release in the future. Just because I told you that I consider Mario Kart 7 as a forgettable mess doesn't mean that you have to flip your entire perception of the game to mimic my own. Let's all be civil down in the comments, okay? The Empire of Tamriel has controlled Skyrim for a long time. While the Reman dynasty controlled our Nordic territories during its reign, Skyrim was officially integrated as a part of the Empire at the end of the Second Era and has remained as the province of Skyrim ever since. Skyrim has been considered a land of men ever since Nords migrated to the area so many years ago. However, due to mass immigration throughout the years, other races such as Orcs and Dunmer have also settled in the area. Not to mention that the province of Reach is historically a homeland of Reachmen who originate from Bretons, a race of men who are often considered as half men and half mer. There is also one more claim to the area which I will mention later on. But for Nords, Skyrim is considered their homeland, especially due to their strong heritage to the Kingdom of Skyrim that ruled the region prior to the Tamrielic Empire's existence. But there has been trouble recently. White Cold Concordat allowed the Ultima to set very specific demands for the Empire to follow. This irked Nords the most, as not only was the worship of Talos aka Tiber Septim banned throughout the Empire, but Jarls of Skyrim weren't asked for their opinion on these peace terms. Ever since the aforementioned Markarth incident, Emperor Tidus Me II was forced to accept Aldmeri Dominion's demands, allowing Talmor Justiciars to enforce banning of Talos' worship all over Skyrim. In Ulfric's eyes, the aftermath of the Great War and this decision has further turned the Empire, or more specifically the Mede dynasty, into a puppet regime of the Aldmeri Dominions. So in a way, the Aldmeri Dominion are trying to slowly but surely ignite the corpse of the formerly glorious Empire so that they can later grab their ashes and fuse it as a part of their own empire. This is where Ulfric's independent and strong Kingdom of Skyrim would come in. If he managed to remove Skyrim from Cyrodiil's realm, the worship of Talos could be allowed once more, and the newly formed Kingdom of Skyrim would fight against the terror of the Talmor, finishing off what the Empire tried to do during the Great War. In other words, Ulfric decides to lead a kingdom of his own, remove it from the Empire, and to dispel High Elves from that kingdom. However, I am afraid that the problem here is Ulfric himself. Even he doesn't necessarily know what he is doing exactly. He doesn't seem to see the bigger picture here. The Empire, even at its weakened state, is still stronger than Skyrim's province alone from a militaristic standpoint. If Ulfric were to win the Civil War, it would leave out two nations at their lowest point. The Kingdom of Skyrim, which is governed by a new High King who has never led a country before in his life. Absolute logistical nightmare from many perspectives. And the nation would still be divided to two sides, pro-Stormcloaks and Imperial loyalists, leaving the land war-torn and divided for decades to come. And this is if we ignore the Reachman situation, which we probably shouldn't be ignoring in the case if Ulfric wins the Civil War. And then the Empire of Tamriel, being either ruled by an unpopular dynasty or being left without a ruler depending on Place's choices during the Dark Brotherhood questline. The Empire would be in shambles after losing their most northern province and having lost one of their smartest generals, that being General Tullius. It would be very likely for other provinces of Tamriel to seek independence from the Empire after seeing that the Empire isn't strong enough to protect their people. This would lead the entire continent to be within grasp of the Aldmeri Dominion. While there is no doubt that Skyrim as a united nation would eventually be stronger than what it is as an autonomous province, the rebuilding phase could take even 10 years or more before it is more powerful than what it was as a part of the Empire of Tamriel. Besides, I think it is relatively easy to state that they would still struggle in case of the Aldmeri Dominion's offensive war. By all means, it would be safer to cooperate with the Empire, but instead Ulfric goes all in, dividing the Empire more in the process, which obviously isn't good for any upcoming conflict. Does Ulfric seriously think that if he declared Skyrim independent, Aldmeri Dominion would just sit idly watching for the Empire to recover from their losses? Nah-uh. Besides, Ulfric's belief that the Empire is nothing but the Aldmeri Dominion's puppet state is just straight up bullshit. The Empire of Tamriel at its current state is looking for stability. That is why they are maintaining peace as long as possible. They are forced to yield to Alinor's demands in stomping down Talos' warship to maintain peace for a little longer. After all, this so-called Cold War period between the Great War and modern day is just temporary, and the Empire wants to use it as long as possible to come up with reinforcements. Even General Tullius knows that peace between two superpowers is just temporary.
What I'm not so sure about is the peace we've made with the Thalmor. But we'll keep that between the two of us, alright?
Yes, it may come out as Imperials acting out of cowardice, but I personally think they had no other option during the Great War. The current status quo is essentially mandatory in regaining their strength. The Aldmeri Dominion has basically everything to gain from the Civil War. That is why they were the ones funding Stormcloaks ever since the Markarth incident. It is even possible that the Stormcloak Rebellion was exactly what the Aldmeri Dominion and the Thalmor had intended since the beginning. Any prolonged conflict would hurt the Empire both militarily as well as economically. Regardless of how the war ends, it will take a heavy toll on civilians and families of fallen soldiers. This would cause tensions within the Empire, and other areas in the Empire could find themselves looking to replicate Ulfric's example. In the later game, when Draco infiltrates the Thalmor embassy, he finds some dossiers, one of them discussing Ulfric's Stormcloak. It states the following. As long as the Civil War proceeds in its current indecisive fashion, we should remain hands-off. Obviously, Ulfric's death would have dramatically increased the chance of an Imperial victory and thus harmed our overall position in Skyrim. A Stormcloak victory is also to be avoided. However, so even indirect aid to the Stormcloaks must be carefully managed. Based on this, the Thalmor wish for the war to continue for as long as possible, preferably entering into a stalemate similar to the ceasefire during the Korean War in our world. And it is pretty much confirmed that the Aldmeri Dominion is looking forward to their second war against the Empire, as in this very dossier I just read out, they call the Great War as First War against the Empire. Presumably their plan is to destroy the Empire and establish a global elven rule over the lands of Tamriel. I don't think that would be an ideal reality to live in. So anything that weakens or slows the Empire's enforcement rate is playing directly to High Elves' hands. That is the very reason why the Thalmor didn't want to have Ulfric executed, as if Ulfric ends up dead, Imperials will surely vanish any remaining Stormcloaks in a heartbeat. Which is most likely why Tullius ordered his men to execute Ulfric at Helgen, as any further waiting period could have led into the Thalmor attempting to intervene. And while it would be Thalmor's interest for the Empire to lose the Civil War, they still don't wish for the Stormcloaks to win. since, as I stated earlier, United Skyrim would definitely be stronger than what it is under the rule of the Empire. Besides, it would go directly against Talmos's wish to re-establish Talos' worship in Skyrim, as if Talos' worship is normalized once more, I really don't think that in this scenario Nords would submit to elven gods. Skyrim was also historically elven land, ruled by ancient snow elves before Nords arrived in Tamriel. Knowing the very nationalistic outlook Altmer people tend to have, it wouldn't surprise me if they had a claim on Skyrim's lands, and therefore, allowing Nords to have their independence would severely slow down Skyrim's reoccupation and cleansing process. So from a purely political standpoint, it really depends on how an individual sees the situation between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Empire. Hell, one could even see Talmor as the sympathetic ones. I am not judging any of my elven viewers' opinions, even if they happen to have poor taste. But realistically speaking, Imperials are a no-brainer option for Tamriel's safety and longevity in mind. Even if the option is pointless in the end, as no matter who loses, their group will spend the next 100 years or more hating the winning side and might even start another civil war, who knows. Not to forget the situation that Ulfric caused back in the Reach, which is just providing fuel to a boiling pot. But we as players have the hindsight of knowing quirks of both sides, due to our world's natural affinity to a time-traveling technique known as save states. We can easily experience the war from the POV of both Pelicans. How about Draco themselves though? Draco cannot just create a new character, start over or load a save. So how would Draco select their side if Tamriel was a real place and they had one chance to do things right? Well, canonically, I suppose he didn't pick his side, but rather went with the season unending approach where he helps to sign a ceasefire between both sides at High Hrothgar. But I like to think that Draco would pick Imperials purely for the fact that if Ulfric is killed, Runewolf Freewinter becomes Jarl of Windhelm, who is acceptable of so-called outsiders in Windhelm. W for diversity. But in real note, it depends on which order the player decides to finish each quest in the game. Is Draco willing to let go of his grudge after he was almost executed? General Tullius states that Draco's execution must have been a major oopsie, therefore any crime that he has committed is forgiven. But even then, for him to meet Tullius, he would have to actually approach him at Castle Dower. How do I do pronounce Castle Dower?
Dower.
Whatever, I go with that. If the player doesn't approach the Halfingar hold, Draco could very well think that he is still held accountable for his crime and therefore is a wanted fugitive by the Empire. The possibility for this thought is even higher on my playthrough where I assassinated the Emperor Titus Mede II before doing anything Civil War related, therefore I had a 1.6k bounty in Halfingar Hall. In this circumstance, I think it is understandable if Draco joins the ranks of Stormcloaks and believes in the illusion that Ulfric could fight against the Aldmeri Dominion. However, if I were to go with a lovely good character who destroyed the Dark Brotherhood for Penitus Oculatus, I could definitely see Draco joining Imperials, especially if he considers Ulfric as a criminal, or even worse, a racist. It really depends on how the player is role-playing their character, which is great for enjoyers of the RPG genre like me. Unfortunately, the usage of civil war in Skyrim's main narrative itself feels rather shallow, and it is so heavily underutilized in the game that it is only relevant as an idea. It feels more like a plot device for the setting of the game to make it seem as if there was a bloody conflict hidden beneath the Dragon Crisis. Everywhere throughout Skyrim you will find NPCs discussing how impactful the Civil War actually is, but if you purposely decide to not do the Civil War questline, you will barely find any forces from either side fighting each other. Sure, sometimes the game triggers a random encounter where you can see a few soldiers from both sides fighting against each other, but this happens way too infrequently to make any sort of impact in the game. The whole Civil War won't even advance unless the player purposely involves themselves in the war, which kills any suspense from the war. So essentially whoever the player sides with is the de facto victor of the Civil War, as long as the player bothers to slump through the questline. But seriously, who even plays it in the base game? The questline is extremely lacking in both execution and creativity. It is as if developers first came up with an idea of Skyrim Civil War and then just forgot to actually use it outside of a couple of mentions throughout the main quest. If we go outside the main quest itself, it is as if civil war never happened to begin with. You can assassinate the Emperor, but this has no significance on Civil War's progression. The vampire situation in Dawnguard DLC is the newest talk in the town, but Empire or Stormcloaks have absolutely zero plans to take care of the issue, leaving several people dead in almost daily vampire attacks. Instead, a group completely independent from the Empire and Stormcloaks are given the charge in eliminating the vampire threat. Absolutely ludicrous. Even when the Civil War is brought back into relevancy in the main quest, it is only used as a mechanic to allow Draco to trap a dragon in Dragon's Reach, nothing more. Yeah, you can give areas to the sides of your choosing and get alternating dialogue based on your choices, but that's about it. Both sides just eat up your choices due to your plot-related significance and leave it at that. Once season unending is done, you can go back to not giving a shit about the whole concept. No matter which side quest you are playing, the Civil War is always considered as background fodder that could as well not exist. If you were to remove the Civil War from the game entirely, most quests would have absolutely zero changes on them, as any acknowledgement of the ongoing situation is mostly just throwaway dialogue that is as forgettable as the Civil War itself. Which is a huge shame, as not only would Skyrim benefit from more interactivity, but the concept of the Civil War on its own is extremely interesting. However, what about the dragon threat that I have briefly touched on before? How does it fare against the disappointment that was the Civil War? There are two separate groups that help Draco in his quest of stopping the dragon threat, those being the Greybeards and the Blades. So let's talk about them. See, Draco is actually a dragonborn. Players find out about this after stopping Milmulnir's attack on Whiterun as Draco absorbs its soul. Dragon's death is somewhat complicated, so let me explain it in the most understandable way. Dragons can be killed by regular humans, but only dragonborns can absorb their souls. If one's soul is absorbed, their soul won't return to their creator, Akatosh, who is one of the 9 divines. Of course, it isn't reasonable to think that dragons could be resurrected, since that would require power so strong that hasn't existed in thousands of years. Regardless, if a dragon is left without their soul, they cannot be resurrected. Dragonborns, on the other hand, are regular individuals with a body of mortal, but blood and soul of a dragon. This is why Dragonborns are able to absorb a slain dragon's power, as dragons are naturally capable of absorbing their slain kin's soul. And while it may take a regular humans multiple decades to even begin learning some semblance of the ability to speak in the language of dragons, Dragonborns are naturally able to feel the voice of dragons. Thanks to Dragonborns' ability to use dragons' power and efficiently slay them, they have usually been dragon slayers throughout Tamriel's history. With the help of several different dragonborns, dragons were either exterminated or forced into hiding. Now that dragons are seemingly returning, the lives of Tamriel's citizens are single-handedly in dragonborns' hands. Or more specifically, Draco's hands. Although I think it is finally time to drop the nickname Draco and call him by his actual name, Dragonborn. Milmulnir's demise managed to trigger someone, as a group of very loud men hop in and decide to celebrate absorption of Dragon's soul by impairing the hearing of the entirety of Skyrim's population. Those men are the Greybeards, masters of the voice and teachers of the tomb. They are living in seclusion at High Hrothgar, a monastery disconnected from the lousy, rotten feudal world, and most importantly, away from the evils of society. Them having a proper party means that they have found interest in Dragonborn and are summoning him to meet up with them. The Greybeards are these hood-wearing monks that live in absolute silence as they want to immerse themselves in the way of the voice. After being stuck in their idle animation for several decades, their voices have become so powerful that even a whisper could start a deadly avalanche. Which makes me wonder, how is this even possible? Is it that their voice is so vibration-inducing, or is it just so loud that it causes shakes in mountains? Because later on into the game, we hear all of them talk at the same time while Dragonborn sits in the middle of all that. Wouldn't they just immediately shatter their own and, well, Dragonborn's hearing at the same time? How does High Hrothgar even exist as a building, if Greybeards' voices are strong enough to start an avalanche? I'm curious to know what material was used in creating the place. Did Greybeards borrow vibranium from people of Wakanda or something? The Greybeards are definitive pacifists. They wish to use the ability to cast a tomb for achieving wisdom. This style of thinking comes from Jürgen Windcaller, the original founder of the Greybeards. He was a commander of the Nordic army during the Battle of Red Mountain that took place during the First Era, but he tragically lost the battle, losing countless of his men in the process. He returned back home pondering about purpose in life for years on end, until finally figuring out that gods betrayed Nords and punished them for exploiting the power of Tomb. This led to Windcaller founding the Greybeards and teaching other fellow mortals the peaceful way of the voice in order to preserve the power for generations to come. This is why the Greybeards don't use their abilities to gain power, as to them, Tomb is a gift from gods and should not be used for anyone's personal gain. According to the Greybeards, if someone were born as Dovahkiin, a Dragonborn, they should only use their gift to protect and teach people of Tamriel, not for their own benefit. Aranga, seemingly the only Greybeard capable of talking like a normal human without causing immediate deafness, assigns Dragonborn a task to fetch the horn of Jürgen Windcaller from an ancient ruin of Ustengrav, where Windcaller was buried at. And this is where my first problem with the Greybeards comes in. We all know that Delphine managed to steal the horn from Ustengrav, stating that Greybeards have always been predictable, which heavily implies on the chance that the Greybeards always seemingly ask new Dragonborns to retrieve the horn from Ustengrav.
But how did she know about it? Either she's a Greybeard, which we know isn't the case, or she read it from the Sacred Blades texts. Or alternatively, it is a common knowledge between commoners that Greybeards tend to send Dragonborns to a quest to retrieve a horn of Jürgen Windcaller from Ustengrav. Regardless of the situation, it paints Greybeards as pretty incompetent in my opinion. In other words, it is a known fact that Greybeards are telling new Dragonborns to fetch the horn of their founder, then why even do it in the first place, since anyone that has a knowledge of Way of the Voice could essentially get through these trials that requires you to use the tomb. If we didn't know beforehand that it was Delphine that stole the horn, for all we know, anyone could have stolen the horn, like Ulfric Stormcloak, who we know has knowledge in Way of the Voice. Sure, the horn doesn't really benefit anyone in any sort of way, but they could have still stolen it with a malicious intent. We know that Delphine had no malicious intents in stealing the horn, but since the summoning of Dragonborn is such a rare event, it isn't that strange to assume that there is at least one other person on Tamriel that knows about the Greybeards using Ustengrav as their playground. It surely would have been a problem if a Talmor agent capable in the Way of the Voice fetched the item instead. Knowing all of this, first of all, Delphine knew that the Greybeards would send the Dragonborn to fetch the horn. Alright, not bad. Next, she had to get through the whirlwind sprint puzzle and the burning floor where Dragonborn can use his become ethereal shout. Of course, you can evade this whole thing by carefully platforming, but there's an issue. She still had to do all of this by herself without using a tomb of her own and without showing any tracks of her being there. Alright, fine, I will believe that. She had to do all of this before Dragonborn arrived, since the letter was already placed at Windcaller's hand when Dragonborn got there. She also had to purposely close the hidden entrance to Windcaller's tomb while exiting and get back to Riverwood before Dragonborn returned from Ustengrav. She had to do all of this while going through each dragon burial site one by one to see which ones were empty or not. Only then could she have had time to enter Ustengrav and steal the horn, while we all know that the Dragonborn only gave the horn to Farengar at most a day before the initial audible summoning from the Greybeards. This is, of course, if the assumption is that Delphine's first thought after the Greybeards' summon wasn't to steal the horn, but rather go through the burial mounds. But if she stole the horn and only then proceeded to check dragon burial mounds, there was no certainty that she would be present once Dragonborn returns to look out for her. It isn't even possible that Delphine stole the horn from someone who had formerly stolen it, as she would still have to get back to Ustengrav and place the letter for Dragonborn to see. A popular theory in the fandom that people usually go with is that Delphine was trailing Dragonborn and therefore was able to get past Whirlwind Sprint puzzle, but this doesn't make sense. As discussed earlier, Delphine would have to perfectly follow Dragonborn with an invisibility potion without being spotted and then get through these fiery pressure plates without Dragonborn noticing her whatsoever.
then access Jürgen Windcorliss's tomb without causing these huge monuments to rise from underwater and therefore showing that she was there before Dragonborn. I don't care, it's just bullshit. Also, I found it interesting that she's able to do such stunts when she's at her 50s, especially since the life expectancy in our world just around 70 years ago was 45 to 48 years old, and Delphine is in her 50s during medieval times. Although it's very important to state that average age of humans was significantly lower in our world due to deadly diseases and overall bad hygiene. Most diseases had no cure and vaccines were still in the earlier stages. The world of Tamriel has potions for curing diseases as well as literal magic that can heal almost any wound. It is no surprise that people can maintain strong physiques to their 50s and fight as if they were in their 20s. So, I guess it's possible, especially since Delphine is a strong warrior. That being said, I would still argue that her agility is more than likely weaker than Dragonborn's, even if Draco is at minimal strength due to her age alone. But then again, this is more of a nitpick than anything else. The only reasonable explanation I could think of is that Delphine hired someone knowledgeable in the way of voice and whirlwind sprint to find the horn for her before Dragonborn even gets to Ustengrav. That person could then place the letter for the Dragonborn and give the horn to Delphine. But even then, there is absolutely nothing in the game that would indicate that Delphine asked someone else to fetch the horn for her. Although I suppose the so-called canon answer to this debacle is that Delphine was somehow able to access the side entrance to obtain the horn. As for how did she manage that? After all, it was already closed when Dragonborn entered Ustengrav. Don't know? Then don't ask questions. Well, regardless. Delphine's point in stealing the horn was to show that in the Greybeards' mind, anyone who gets the horn could be the Dragonborn. After all, the whole objective is for a Dragonborn to fetch the horn. And this is exactly what I see at fault at Greybeards' thinking. At least when it comes to trustworthiness and capability of teaching the last Dragonborn. Even further, once Dragonborn actually returns the horn, he has to sit through the voice of the Greybeards. I know Draco is the Dragonborn and he has plot armor tighter than the security at the Emperor's ship, but what if he got killed by the Greybeards? Wouldn't it be funny if he just fainted and the Greybeards just sighed that another one bites the dust? And if a single whisper from the Greybeards could launch a deadly avalanche, then how about a ritual involving all of them talking in the same time? Unlucky! Citizen of Everstead are now dead, I suppose. Skill issue. Should have fast traveled away, I suppose. Yeah, that makes me think that the Greybeards are frauds, or at the very least, a little silly. But even then, I don't hate the Greybeards. They are a respectable group of people who possess the power to commit atrocities but choose to hold their power within. Their objective has been to teach other mortals the way of the voice, as well as to guide any potential Dragonborn to the way of wisdom. And I don't think their attraction towards wisdom is a bad thing. We all know that power can corrupt even the noblest of people. I mean, if it weren't for laws, mankind would most likely live in a constant state of anarchy where regular people would have to fight for their lives every day to survive. If our world had power as strong as the voice, there would certainly be people who wanted to use it for their own benefit. But the Greybeards still choose to not use it, and that is admirable, at least in my opinion. Not only that, but they also agree with Dragonborn that the World Eater is the grand enemy, which requires everyone's attention. They agreed to help Dragonborn with signing the ceasefire between the Empire and Stormcloaks. If it weren't for the Greybeards, that likely would not have ever happened, and then Dragonborn could never defeat the World Eater. Their faction, regardless of what some other people think, is still admired throughout Skyrim and seen as a positive influence in everyday life, no matter what the people of Everstead have to suffer through. Alright, well, how about the Blades? If you guys have played earlier Elder Scrolls games, the Blades should be familiar since they have made their first appearance in Morrowind. They originated from Akiviri dragon god that had slayed dragons since forever. Upon arriving at Tamriel, they swore fealty to Dragonborn, so basically the Emperor of Tamriel, Tiber Septim, and served as the Emperor's personal army and intelligence service, even after Dragonborn heritage was removed from Emperors of Tamriel. Ever since then, they had been searching for their purpose. There were no dragons to be slain, neither were there Dragonborns to serve. Their whole organization was essentially dissolved by the Talmor. However, there were some survivors, 2 known ones in fact.
We can meet Delphine before her primary introduction in the main story at Sleeping Giant Inn, where she lives her everyday life as an innkeeper. This is all a facade, however, as in reality she is a hardened warrior and a fugitive running from Talmos' wrath. And as we know, she was also the one who stole the horn from Moostengraf, but we don't talk about that part. She did this to test whether Dragonborn was a Talmor plant or not. See, she's just slightly paranoid.
After dodging Talmor traps for decades on end and being left behind by other Blades members, she sees traps everywhere and trusts no one. She purposely avoids interacting with other members of the Blades as to not expose her existence in case her fellow Bladey listeners were to defect, which is only natural due to human instinct to stay alive. Yet she seems well connected. She managed to cooperate with Farengar to get a copy of Dragonstone. That way she also managed to find every Dragon burial mound site and then figure out where the Vault Eater would strike next.
She knows Prionjolf, and she even wore a Thieves Guild hood when visiting Dragon's Reach. And finally, she has so much influence that she has a spy working in Talmos Skyrim's embassy, that being Malborn. It is a miracle really that Talmor hasn't found her yet, but that just proves her capabilities in both survivability and combat, since according to the Talmor dossier discussing her, she has once wiped out an entire Talmor assassination team all on her own. This really says something about her strength, since Talmor is supposed to be the most successful and strongest private force in Tamriel. So yeah, she is quite strong. This is probably why Delphine has developed such a cynical and quite frankly sociopathic personality. See, while she cares about her allies, she seems to have no hesitation to leave them dead if she cannot benefit from them staying alive. If her associate were to die, it would be their problem, not hers, as long as their death doesn't impact her.
The biggest example of this takes place during Diplomatic Immunity, where during my playthrough Malborn tragically died before I could save him, but Delphine, one who hired him, doesn't even ask Dragonborn whether Malborn made it out. Essentially, Malborn just served her as a tool to provide her intel on Talmos' latest whereabouts and to allow Dragonborn easier access to Talmor Embassy. It is as if she had already assumed that he would die and didn't even ask whether it was the case or not. And obviously Dragonborn's intel was more valuable to her than anything related to Malborn. While I suppose it is possible that Delphine already knew that Malborn had died through other means, since her intelligence network seems to be quite large, it would have still been something if Delphine at least commented that, "Oh, it's unfortunate that we lost Malborn," or something along the lines.
Hey, it's post-edit Jaru again. I wanted you all to know that even though I'm obviously defending Malborn here, this whole plan which involves disturbing the Talmor during the party is very stupid. I do not know who came up with this plan, whether it was Malborn himself or Delphine, but seriously, did Malborn think that anyone wouldn't notice the disappearance of Dragonborn? Not only that, there is plenty of Talmor security here. Surely one of them noticed right off the bat when Dragonborn mysteriously went to the back rooms with Malborn. It is already quite suspicious that Malborn disappears to begin with, since he is supposed to be a bartender of this place. So just imagine when the only guest without a noble or capitalistic background just suddenly disappears out of nowhere. I wonder whether they are a spy or not. Executing this type of plan is essentially a death sentence for Malborn no matter what, and I do not understand why he agreed to this. Unless Delphine had some dirt on him and essentially blackmailed him to work for her. Not to forget that this plan can also get Prelus, an innocent servant, imprisoned for conspiracy reasons. Not the best look for Delphine now, is it? But yeah, let's get back to the video.
This type of behavior becomes even more apparent when Delphine assigns Dragonborn extremely dangerous missions where the likelihood of success is ridiculously low. For instance, infiltrating the Talmor Embassy. Considering how paranoid Delphine is of the Talmor, I am surprised that she didn't anticipate them to know who Dragonborn was beforehand, especially since Dragonborn is seemingly the only non-notable person at Eleven's rave party. If Dragonborn got captured or murdered during his interception in Talmor Embassy, the Blades would once more be left without a Dragonborn to follow, and Dragon Threat would remove Nordic rule from Skyrim. Same problem arises when Dragonborn goes to find Esben from the Ratway. Why couldn't Delphine just go with Dragonborn to bring some additional firepower? Nothing stopped her from making public appearances near Vinhelm or Skyhaven Temple, which is a known Dragon Slayer temple. Then again, after Dragonborn escapes enemies' literal headquarters, I suppose Delphine just assumed that he could solo a simple escort mission, no problem. By the way, I'm not saying that Delphine is a bad person for not asking about Malborn or for giving Dragonborn dangerous missions. It is just that these circumstances add up to her being unlikable. For instance, how she suspected the Talmor. As much as there is to hate about Talmor, suspecting them was foolish. Yeah, the origin of her suspicions made sense. In the grand scheme of things, the Talmor is the only force that could globally benefit from dragons returning. Not only would dragons distract the Empire's military and prolong the civil war, but the World Eater's little appearance at Helgen saved Ulfric from imminent death. The timing is a little too convenient, don't you think? But was this enough to safeguard an embassy infiltration where the chance of failure is extremely high? I don't think so, especially since her conspiracy theory is pretty far-fetched. Dragons aren't just some creatures that can be tamed, they are predators, and they attack people for fun. And some kind of malicious entity is reviving seemingly dead dragons as well. Only person that could stop the world from ending is someone who can devour souls of all dragons. That would be Dovahkiin. And even the Talmor should realize that without a Dragonborn, they can't actually stop dragons for good. Dragons have such long lifespans, so just waiting for them to die of old age isn't an option either. If Tamriel were to turn into a large-scale Jurassic Park but with dragons, Alienor wouldn't have anything left to conquer. Although then again, Altmer are so proud of their own race that it wouldn't be that surprising if they assumed to be so superior to other races that they could stop the dragon threat on their own without an ability to devour a dragon's soul. Regardless, my point here is that sending your literal only hope on a potential suicide mission is very erratic and idiotic behavior. Delphine, whose organization was destroyed by the very secret service she's trying to obtain info from, should know this well. That being said, Delphine's primary desire seems to be reviving the Blades from its downfall. This heavily involves Dragonborn since ultimately in the eyes of the Blades, Dragonborns are the greatest dragon slayers of them all. But there is another person who's also vital in restructuring the Blades. Esbern is an old man living in hiding at the Ratway Warrens. He was once a lawmaster of the Blades and one of the few to escape Talmos' terror. Due to his extensive knowledge of dragons and such, he is one who knows most about the current dragon threat in Skyrim. Since even the Talmor wasn't aware of what or who triggered Dragons' return, they captured a Thieves Guild member, Etienne Raunis, and tortured information about Esbern's location out of him. Evidently, the Talmor still wanted to punish Esbern for being a former member of the Blades, but they also figured that he could be the only one to know something about the current situation at hand. After all, dragons could pose a huge threat to the Aldmeri Dominion at some point in time. Unfortunately for the Talmor, Esbern leaves his humble abode after meeting up with Dragonborn. If I am allowed to give an opinion on this, Esbern is a dummy. Why would someone who's hiding from the deadly Special Forces unit in Tamriel pick such a place that is known for being people's hidey hole? Riften is known for hosting the Thieves Guild, and for that reason became notorious for allowing carrier criminals to stay in the city. The Ratway serves as Thieves Guild's base of operations, and come on, the place is literally called the Ratway. I am biased in this argument since I have quite a few hours clocked in the Skyrim and have experienced both the main quest and the city of Riften many times. But ask one of your relatives who has never touched or heard about the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Which place is the most likely to host a person on a run? The Great Quarter, Dawnstar Sanctuary, or the Ratway? Chances are, they will say, the Ratway. Esbern is a Nord, so while choosing his homeland as the place to stay post-Blades disbanding is reasonable, it is unfortunately very predictable. Yes, the Talmor learned of his probable location from Etienne, who more than likely is just an unfortunate casualty in this debacle. However, in the long run, Talmor could have determined his location anyway, especially if they were looking for his tracks in Skyrim either way.
And the fact that the Talmor even found Esbern's location just shows that the Ratway was probably not the best hiding place. If it went for Dragonborn, Esbern would likely be dead by now, and our protagonist would have never stopped the World Eater.
Esbern himself is a pretty paranoid person, just like me for real. If a player tells him that the Talmor are pursuing him, he will automatically assume that the player is with the Talmor and are trying to attempt to deceive him into opening the door.
Esbern will only open the door if Dragonborn mentions the 30th of Frostfall, which was the day that the Talmor executed every single Plague's agent residing in the Aldmeri Dominion and sent their heads to Emperor Titus Mede II as a formal declaration of war. However, what if I told you that I lied? As that is not the only way to get Esbern to open the door. He also opens the door if Dragonborn mentions that Delphine personally sent him, as that reassures Esbern that Delphine is still alive and kicking. Yeah, Esbern is kind of a fool. First of all, I'm completely aware that this is a game mechanic where the developers wanted to give players a way to access Esbern's room via using different dialogue options. But I'm going to ignore it here because I simply do not care. Secondly, Esbern had seemingly chosen the Ratway as a place where he would spend the rest of his days and die at when the world was destroyed by the World Eater.
Yet if someone were to actually look for him, like let's say the Talmor, I doubt that those locks could genuinely stop them. Think about it, if they had a battering ram, at most, those locks would just buy him time. Not a great plan.
Thirdly, Talmor are already more than aware that Delphine is alive.
It wouldn't be that strange if they used her name as bait to gain Esbern's trust. Since they know that Delphine purposely doesn't make contact with other Plague's fugitives to stay hidden, then Esbern also probably wouldn't be up to date on whether she was alive or not. So if Talmor agents were smart, they could very well just use Delphine's name as a way to lure Esbern out of hiding. Perhaps they have even tried that before, who knows? Which is why it is strange that Esbern is so willing to let Dragonborn in, as he could still be a Talmor spy. Then again, most characters in this game are actually very stupid, so of course the biggest secret service in the entire continent hasn't even thought of that plan.
But Jaru, it wouldn't even matter if Talmor were to find him. Esbern is actually pretty good at combat. Even if Talmor were to breach his home, he could still fight against them.
Alright, are you gonna tell me that a group of Talmor specialists cannot defeat a man in his 80s who fights by using destruction magic and via summoning Paarthurnax? Yeah, keep lying to yourself. Besides, that doesn't remove the critique of him staying at the Ratway. If it went for Dragonborn, Esbern would be dead by now. While Esbern commits the biggest sin imaginable, being a nerd, he is often beloved by many Skyrim players. At the very least, I haven't seen Esbern critique that often in the Elder Scrolls community. Then again, with the Elder Scrolls community, I'm talking about Reddit.
Actually, now that I looked at some Reddit posts, you people really seem to hate Esbern. Holy fucking shit. But I will keep this point in the video because I thought it was funny.
Meanwhile, Delphine tends to get all the shit thrown at her, and I haven't met a single person who actually likes her. But I think this is pretty unfair since Esbern is the second half of what is left from the Plagues. If you dislike Delphine, then you probably don't like the idea of the Plagues being run by her. In other words, you should probably dislike Esbern as well, since he approves of whatever Delphine does. It is just that Esbern is a very memorable character. His entire existence serves more as a plot device to drive Dragonborn to the right track, so that he can face the World Eater, rather than actually having a complex personality that we can bond with. But then again, even if I were to make a claim that Esbern was more useful to us than Delphine, well, first of all, that sounds extremely sociopathic. Fictional or not, why even compare friends based on how useful they are? But that claim about his usefulness ain't exactly the truth. Even if Esbern introduces Dragonborn to the idea of Alduin's Wall, if it wasn't for Delphine's everlasting paranoia, Dragonborn would have never found out about Esbern, and then we're back in square one. Although Esbern is also the one who calms Delphine down during season unending after she gets heated about the Greybeards. In fact, Esbern says that it is pointless to maintain grudges from the past. That is quite interesting indeed, knowing what we're gonna discuss next. See, I didn't bring up the Greybeards and the Plagues for no reason here, no. Since we are going to talk about the Paarthurnax dilemma, which may or may not include some former grudges. Blades and the Greybeards seem to be organizations similar to each other. Both are meant to serve Dragonborns in a way and assist them on their journey. However, that wouldn't be further from the truth. The Blades are expert dragon slayers, or at least the organization was built to be filled with expert dragon slayers, and they have sworn their services to Dragonborns over the ages. To be more precise, quoting Jaffer, the former Grand Master of the Blades from Oblivion, quote, "The Blades are sworn to the service of the Emperor as the mortal representative of the dragon blood of the divine Talas." End quote. Now Talas of course was Tiber Septim, the first representative of the Septim bloodline and the first Emperor of Tamriel. Tiber Septim was a Dragonborn and all of his Septim successors were as well. Therefore, while the Blades have technically pledged to serve the Emperor, any Dragonborn successing Tiber Septim is essentially the mortal representative of the dragon blood. As if one is born as Dragonborn, they have dragon blood flowing in their system. Or at the very least, this is the presumption here. Whether that makes our homie Draco eligible to be an Emperor is debatable, but that question isn't what we are here for today. Due to the Blades being dragon slayers at heart, their thinking unsurprisingly tends to be really anti-dragon. In their opinion, dragons are inherently evil due to their natural desire to rule over Mundus and enslave mankind. Therefore, in order to remove the root of this evil and preserve mankind's safety, all of them have to be killed. However, as most dragons were either killed or driven into hiding after the Dragon War, Blades have instead relied on serving those with dragon blood, Dragonborns, as they are the ones capable of killing dragons for good. So in the case of the World Eaters' return, Dragonborn would be the one to lead the charge against the dragon cult. Greybeards' thinking alters drastically from the Blades' point of view. According to Arengar, dragons are part of the natural order of the world. They are there to maintain power balance in the world as well as to just live there as Nirn's natural inhabitants, just like men, mer, beastfolk and other living beings. In a way, killing of dragons is a matter of genocide and is no better than committing a genocide involving other beings. The Blades were the ones leading the genocide of dragons back in the days and now they have returned to do it again. Let's take a real world example here. What if a random organization closely collaborating with your local government were to declare that all species of lions must be exterminated due to them having an ability to kill humans? Would you approve this? Of course not, right? That would be an extreme case of animal cruelty. Besides, no reasonable person would willingly approach a lion's territory as it obviously poses a serious risk of getting harmed. But if you think about it, we humans are conquerors. We took the world by storm and inhabited the entirety of our planet's terrain. In a way, we are the ones threatening the living space of lions and, by extension, practically every living creature on our planet. Some animals like birds, cats and dogs have shifted over the years to coexist with us humans to the point where a sight of humans isn't any stranger to them than eating food. But then there are some species that generally fear humans and attack them with no hesitation. They see us as a threat. Lions may not be afraid of humans, but they are ready to defend their territory to protect their kind. They would attack humans if we came close. But let's face it, if you saw a lion roaming the streets, potentially endangering other humans, and had a weapon on your hands, so would you. Dragons in the Elder Scrolls universe are no different. Yes, you could argue that their leader just happens to be evil, and they attack humans for selfish reasons. But they are yet another species fighting for their survival. If Dragonborn and the Blades were to wipe dragons out of existence, it doesn't make them any morally better than from the dragons themselves, as essentially they are committing similar levels of genocides as dragons did throughout the First Era. To the Greybeards, the way of the voice is a pathway to wisdom. It should be handled with care and gratitude towards the gods who allow the mere humans to feel such power. As a Dragonborn, Draco shouldn't use his power to gain more power, but rather to maintain peace and solitude. Which makes perfect sense, as power can also be practiced as a method of maintaining peace. Nuclear weapons are probably the best example in our world. One who governs power doesn't have to use it. They can still be respected for possessing that power and abstaining from its use. For some, it would be enough to know that the Dragonborn is powerful, as that would stop them from attacking him or his friends.
So based on the Greybeards, if Dragonborn were to follow the Blades, he would serve as nothing more than a pawn to feed Blades' dragon-hating crusade. In other words, to quote Aranga, quote, "They, Blades, have always sought to turn the Dragonborn from the path of wisdom," end quote. Emphasis on always. This more than likely hints at how Tiber Septim ignored Greybeards' wisdom and formed the Septim Empire, and it is possible that the Blades impacted Talos' choice in this regard. On the other hand, Delphine sees the Greybeards as a group of people who refuse to use their power. From her point of view, all the great rulers and warriors had the power, and they for sure used that power. If they hadn't used the power in a fear of using the power for wrongdoing, they wouldn't be remembered as great heroes to begin with. To the Blades, the concept of Dragonborn is built around them being greatest dragon slayers of all time. Hence, it is only natural for the Blades, an organization meant to specialize in dragon slaying, to follow such a figure. Although this obviously opens up more can of worms, such as whether status of being a strong fighter with a lot of power is more important for Blades members than being known as a wise person who refuses to use power for betterment of others. Better die as a hero than as zero, huh? Well, I suppose that is true to some extent, but as another common saying goes, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Which is it that Dragonborn chooses? Does he take advantage of his power to become known as the greatest and most prestigious hero of all time? Or does he reserve himself so that the series of genocides would finally come to full stop? Alright, so how is this relevant to our topic in hand in any way? Well, upon first meeting with the Greybeards, Dragonborn is told that their leader, Paarthurnax, lives at the throat of the world. Aranga then stated that when the time was right, we could pursue Paarthurnax and seek his guidance. Dragonborn finally got his chance after asking Aranga about the Dragonrend shout that could help Dragonborn in defeating the World Eater. Greybeards couldn't teach him the shout, and neither was Aranga happy to help Dragonborn in getting answers to how he could learn the shout. However, Greybeards teach Dragonborn Clear Skies shout, enabling him to seamlessly walk through icy wind in order to gain access to the throat of the world. And as it turns out, the leader of Greybeards and the one residing at the throat of the world is none other than Paarthurnax, a living and breathing dragon.
It's me, Mario!
We have a genuine problem on our hands. See, Paarthurnax is one of the 3 friendly dragons in the game, the other 2 being Odawing, whom we first have to defeat at Dragon's Reach to tame, and Dunavir, whom we need to defeat at Soulcairn during the Dawn Guard storyline to tame. Paarthurnax is the first dragon who we aren't forced to defeat in combat before they act friendly. He is rather friendly towards Dragonborn by default. This is a refreshing change from ever so bloodthirsty dragons that players have to face on daily basis. Not only that, Paarthurnax seemingly condemns other dragons' actions, or more precisely, the World Eater and his comrades' actions. And he's ready to help Dragonborn with his knowledge on words of power and other such things. Paarthurnax will also never attack Dragonborn unless combat was purposely started against him in purpose of slaying him. Due to these perks, many people describe Paarthurnax as a true homie, and even as the most useful non-follower NPC in the whole game when it comes to both gameplay and story. After all, without good old Paarthurnax, we would not have ever pursued an Elder Scroll and hadn't learned the Dragonrend shout. But as you all know, there is an issue. Paarthurnax isn't necessarily the most innocent of the bunch. More specifically, he is the World Eater's kin, who served as his chief lieutenant prior to his own betrayal. He has committed loads of war crimes and atrocities to mankind that are absolutely inexcusable. Sure, they may have happened thousands of years ago, and by modern standards you could say that crime has certainly expired. But then again, it is easy for us bare humans to say when we are seemingly the only sentient species on our planet. The problem that I shall call the Paarthurnax dilemma serves 2 purposes. Not only does it provide players a proper decision with actual consequences, as well as another decision whether they align with the Blades or Greybeards. This is also a great question concerning the players' morality. So, shall we discuss it?
Now, I honestly think this is a pretty good addition to the game by Bethesda, and I wish the game had more options like this that actually led to serious consequences. Of course, most people on PC are probably going to install a mod that allows them to keep Paarthurnax alive while also being able to rebuild the plates. But I personally quite like the ability of being able to choose between two evils here, as it teaches players that sometimes in life you need to make serious decisions that will affect your life for good. Also that there is no shortcut to happiness, as sometimes you just need to cut something out of your life completely and potentially even regret it in the future. What is this decision exactly? Well, the Blades will eventually find out that Paarthurnax is living at the throat of the world and is protected by the Greybeards. They are demanding Dragonborn to slay Paarthurnax, or they are unwilling to serve Dragonborn from that point on. And yeah, this is why I use the Blades as a plural here. Both Delphine and Esbern will refuse to work with Dragonborn till Paarthurnax is killed. Those who defended Esbern from my earlier criticism are real quiet right about now. As a counter, if Dragonborn actually decides to go through it and kill Paarthurnax, Dragonborn will no longer gain intel on nearby word walls from Arenga, neither will he be able to gain tomb-related buffs from Paarthurnax, well, since he's dead. If the player decides to help Delphine and Esbern in rebuilding Blades, they will gain additional forces to help in the player's dragon hunting adventures. Esbern can also provide Dragonborn with some dragon-related buffs like dealing more damage against dragons for X amount of seconds. From a gameplay perspective, this choice depends mostly on what the player is looking for. Perhaps they enjoy rebuilding an organization from scratch and like killing dragons. Then choosing to kill Paarthurnax is the best option. Or maybe the player decides to become stronger overall and enjoys tomb buffs that Paarthurnax gives to the player. Then choosing to spare Paarthurnax is the best option. Both options close off one friendly faction from Dragonborn, so one needs to choose lesser evil when picking their side. But of course, this decision isn't as simple as you think. Anyone who has paid close attention to my ramblings in the past hour or so would know that the Blades swore their allegiance to Dragonborn. Of course, if you were to nitpick, you could argue that the Blades have sworn their loyalty to the Emperor. That would mean Titus Mead II or whoever succeeds him, not specifically Draco, no matter if he's a Dovahkiin or not. But this isn't actually true, since Delphine said the following herself, quote, "And I remember the Blades used to be Dragon Slayers, and that we were sworn to protect the Dragonborn, the greatest Dragon Slayer of all." End quote. Precisely. The Blades have sworn to protect Dragonborn. Additionally, they were sworn to serve a mortal representative of the dragon blood, hence Dragonborn is literally part of Blades' oath. Sure, you could argue that the Blades do not have to serve Dragonborn and they can go on their own if they so choose to. You could even argue that their silly oath doesn't matter in the slightest when these two are seemingly Blades' only members. Delphine assigned herself as the Blades' new Grand Master, and so she is free to change her organization's rules as she pleases. However, that does not change the fact that Delphine and Esbern are in violation of their own organization's oath. Besides, by refusing to serve Dragonborn, they fail at their only task, that being protecting the last Dragonborn. Regardless, they are following extremely selfish principles here. Not only did Delphine force Dragonborn to do her little fetch quests time and time again, but these two wouldn't even have access to Skyhaven Temple, a sacred temple of Akavir Dragon Slayers or Blades' descendants, if it weren't for Dragonborn's humble donation of his blood. Besides, I would love to see Blades try and exist in Tamriel's current landscape. Not only do they publicly follow Talos, but their whole organization is pretty much outlawed from existing. Sure, if Ulfric wins the war, I don't think he cares whether Blades continue their operations. But in a world of eternal status quo, I can't see the Blades existing for long if it weren't for Dragonborn's loyal support. They couldn't fight for their lives 30 years ago when their organization was vastly bigger than now. How could they fight now with the two aged members and a fragile sacred temple? After all, the Talmor is obviously both larger and stronger now than they were during the Great War. They have also increased their influence and are even allowed to patrol all over the Empire's lands in words of enforcing ban on Talos' warship. Because of this, I don't think Delphine or Esbern have anything to really say whether a Paarthurnax should be killed or not, since that should be Dragonborn's choice and they should just respect it.
I mean, hell, arguably, they shouldn't even have any rights to complain about Paarthurnax to begin with, since Dragonborn was the one who basically revived their whole organization to begin with. Realistically speaking, I don't even see any future for the Blades. I mean, seriously, these two just show up at Greybeard's council and show their faces to Eleven, who obviously fucking knows that these two are fugitive Blades members. What could Eleven use this intel for? It seems that the Blades are trying to revive their organization. Could it be that they're using the ancient Akavir temple located in Skyrim as their new headquarters? Good luck staying hidden now. And also, if I were to be completely honest, to me it seems as if Blades are using Dragonborn as a pawn to enforce their own rotten principles on him and to use him in order to rebuild the Blades, as without him they are screwed. This is precisely what Arengar was talking about earlier. On the other hand, are the Blades actually right? Now think about it. This may be a stretch of sorts, but let's say someone threw your whole family in turmoil around 80 years ago or so. This turmoil could be any crime of sorts, but let's just say it is bad enough that multiple members of the family died, went bankrupt, lost their homes for several years, and the crime was bad enough to discredit the family's name for decades to come. Now you find out the culprit and their current family. Their current representative has even become quite a successful person, a president of your country even. Sure, by law, the crime that that person who destroyed your family committed has unfortunately expired, but it doesn't change the fact that you will despise that family and even desire revenge on them till the end of time. Even if the current members of the family were completely innocent and didn't have anything to do with the crime that caused your family to get destroyed. Paarthurnax's case is more complicated since he committed those crimes thousands of years ago. However, obviously the moral statement you can do is that he is responsible since he is still alive. It doesn't matter even if those crimes happened thousands of years ago. Paarthurnax was the one who actually saved mortals from impending doom by betraying his kin, but he was still responsible for plenty of different crimes that brought suffering and death to humans and other living creatures alike. I completely understand when people say that Paarthurnax deserves all the blame and his death penalty, although somehow I'm not yet satisfied with this answer, so I shall dive even further. Tamriel itself is a fantasy location with its own laws. It has multiple different species with individual lifespans. In our world, it is somewhat easy to forgive people when it comes to law. People can change rather easily and learn to regret what they have done. For instance, if you robbed a Pokemon card set from your local store when you were 10 years old, it doesn't mean that you are a career criminal at 20 years old. But one aspect that plays a large role in our forgiving societal system is that human lifespan is so short. Prison isn't on paper supposed to serve as a punishment, but rather as a rehabilitation method where a criminal learns what they did was wrong, and if they commit a crime again, a prison will become their new home. Sure, this system doesn't necessarily work perfectly, as different degrees of crimes such as second-degree manslaughter and rape are absolutely unforgivable, yet may not give as long sentences as fraud per se. But the longer sentences still successfully serve as both a punishment and as a method of rehabilitation, since they take away multiple years from a human's life. This is why I personally prefer prison sentences over death sentences, as one could commit disgusting crimes in hopes of getting an easy way out via guillotine. When you get a lifelong sentence, you are serving the worst penalty imaginable, forced to rot your precious living years at prison. However, since Tamriel has beings capable of infinite lifespans, there is no prison sentence where Paarthurnax could just sit pondering about his past crimes. Some could even argue that him trying to restrain himself from killing mortals is already a big enough punishment for him. After all, Paarthurnax himself states that he should not be trusted and was made to dominate Nirn. So anything that involves him just chilling at the throat of the world and doing fuck all might as well be his prison sentence. But realistically speaking, in a world like Tamriel, blood spilling is exactly what serves as a punishment to those who most deserve it. Additionally, if we were to believe the prophecy that Draco is in fact the last Dragonborn to exist, then who could stop Paarthurnax from starting another Dragon World Order once Draco has died? The last Dragonborn is seemingly the last of his kind, but just like any other Dragonborn before him, he is just a mere mortal. And while it is completely possible that he ascends into godhood like Talos did, it wouldn't make his current mortal self immortal. By killing Paarthurnax and then reuniting with the Blades, you are essentially saving Tamriel from potential disaster that awaits it. But would Paarthurnax actually commit a genocide after the last Dragonborn is dead? Who knows? I personally like to think that he wouldn't. If you think of this slightly further, if we were to assume that the World Eater were to never return, then dragons cannot be brought back from that. Even if Paarthurnax or someone else were to attempt world conquest, the world itself would be safe from getting devoured by a dragon, and humans would most certainly still be safe from dragons, as long as the way of the voice is taught, and humans keep preparing for the worst. Without the World Eater, they will never have to face another dragon crisis ever again. And in order to maintain peace, it would be better if we didn't repeat what the original Blades did. We should prevent the near extinction of the dragon kind. While not possible in the game, it isn't necessarily out of the picture that Dragonborn solves conflict between mortals and dragons eventually, especially if Paarthurnax sticks to his promise of teaching remaining dragons his wisdom. I don't see how them coexisting couldn't be possible, but just like the Greybeard said, sometimes it is better to do absolutely nothing, and if gods meant for the world to end, perhaps it is just time to let it end. Prolonging the inevitable won't do any good, who knows. But hey, I'm interested in what you guys down in the comments think about the situation. In the end, it is somewhat funny to punish Paarthurnax for his crimes from so many years ago. Think about it for a second. How many people you, as the player, killed throughout the game? You can even track this via an in-game menu.
Oh no!
It does also count kills committed by your followers, but in the end those kills were done within your command. Therefore, you are just as guilty as your follower. I think it is hilarious to claim that Paarthurnax, another sentient creature, deserves to die for killing humans in the past, when you, as the current Dragonborn, have killed dozens of sentient creatures yourself, probably didn't give a single flying fuck about it, yet people think as if you're innocent as a bird. No matter how hard one were to claim that they played the game as a lawfully good character, it is basically mandatory to kill people in Skyrim, which makes your character as bad of a person as Paarthurnax, in my eyes. And the question is, do you personally think that your player character deserves to die? While you all ponder over that question,
Never mind that, I will return to Delphine in a sec. However, then we are making a moral decision. In my opinion, people who choose Paarthurnax and Greybeards are those who are more of a pacifist type of kind, who prefer peace and solitude, no matter how big of a murderer Dragonborn themselves are. Meanwhile, people who select Delphine, or Espen, or the Blades overall, they prefer combat, which is completely fine. And that doesn't necessarily mean someone is sociopathic, for instance, for selecting the Blades. However, in a moral standpoint, I feel like selecting Paarthurnax and Greybeards would be probably the better idea in my opinion, since even though you cannot guarantee whether Paarthurnax will become a deadly dragon in the future, he seems to be more aligned with maintaining peace and wisdom in Skyrim, which is something that the Blades are not. But that's just my take. That being said, I don't even think Delphine is a bad character per se, since her flaws make her more fleshed out as a character, and if she was an actual yes woman that followed Dragonborn's every command, her personality would be severely lacking. Besides, this is a video game and Dragonborn is meant to be a silent protagonist. If we weren't given quests by other NPCs, there wouldn't be that much to do in the game, considering its open world nature. However, if there's something you want to claim about Delphine's character, it should be her writing. And no, I'm not talking about her letters or something, I'm talking about her character writing. Her being obnoxious as a character and the Blades being the way they are compared to how they were in previous installments has to do with how Skyrim's writers decided to go with the world building and script writing, which is precisely what is important in the last chapter of this video. Alduin is a wolf in the Elder Scrolls Online. No, I'm being serious, look it up.
Well, anyway, Alduin is the name of the World Eater. I've been purposely referring to him as the World Eater throughout this video to focus solely on him in the final chapter of this video. After all, he is the main antagonist of the game. We first came across Alduin at Helgen, but we had our first conversation with him at Kyne's Grove as he was reviving Saloknir from his burial mound. It is instantly clear that Alduin is not like other dragons, since if other dragons had his capability, we surely would have had dragon attacks all over Tamriel throughout all Elder Scrolls games. Alduin has the ability to devour the souls of both living and dead, as well as the ability to revive his already dead comrades. Despite having such strong attributes under his belt, he was still only considered a legend throughout Tamriel and its history.
This is due to him getting trapped in a time wound by some brave Nords oh so many years ago. Such an operation required an item as strong as Elder Scroll to be used, and even then it barely sent Alduin forward more than a couple thousands of years. Alduin's return itself was inscribed in a prophecy concerning the last Dragonborn, which goes as followed. Quote, "When Misrule takes its place at the 8 corners of the world, when the brass tower walks and time is reshaped, when the thrice blessed fail and the red tower trembles, when the Dragonborn ruler loses his throne and the white tower falls, when the snow tower lies sundered, kingless, bleeding, the World Eater wakes and the wheel turns upon the last Dragonborn." End quote. The World Eater is a honorific that was given to Alduin so many years ago. This comes from the fact that at his full power, Alduin is able to erase the current mortal plane and create a new one that is more to his liking. According to some ancient Nordic myths, he destroyed the previous world and created the current one Elder Scrolls games take place on. Although take everything that I just described with a grain of salt. We obviously cannot confirm whether these myths are true or not, since there is no one left from that reality other than Alduin himself. Regardless, I think this is enough information to showcase how scary Alduin is and why we should take his return seriously. That is, if his plan wasn't stupid and didn't represent outright clown behavior throughout the game. Like seriously, what is his plan exactly? Send a sacrificial lamb to Whiterun's watchtower? That will show those pesky mortals. Oh no, Dragonborn emerged. Let's mock him and proceed with our plan anyway, even though he's the only one that can actually stop my plan. Oh no, Dragonborn figured out my plan. Fuck it. Let's just sit idly doing absolutely nothing till he finds an Elder Scrolls so he can repeat what happened last time. Oh shit, that bastard learned the Dragon Run shout and defeated me. Let's pussy out and go to Sovngarde. There's absolutely no way that he could stop me there. Oh no, he got to Sovngarde through a portal and now has 3 dead warriors fighting for his side. There's absolutely no way he could defeat me this time. Alright, so let's recap a bit. Alduin's plan was seemingly to finish off what he started during the Dragon War. He planned to kill as many mortals as possible so that they could find themselves at Sovngarde, where he could then devour their souls, becoming stronger in the process. When his stomach is full enough, he's powerful enough to wipe the entire Mundus and then restart it from scratch. Since you can't harm him while he's in the air, and Alduin is essentially immortal even when Dragonrend is utilized, he expected absolutely no resistance from humans and bullied them for fun. His goal at the start of the game was to attack Whiterun, kill as many people as possible, and then repeat the process with other holds. Even if his comrades were to die by mortal hand, he could just revive them in a flash and try again. Alternatively, he at first just tried to take over Tamriel by utilizing his comrades, but since he met heavy resistance from Dragonborn and his followers, he had enough of this world and just decided to destroy it in order to prevent Dragonborn from killing him. But even then, I don't particularly see why he needed his followers to do the killing. He is literally immortal. Just attack a city you like, access Sovngarde and repeat. And if I understood correctly, he doesn't even need to go to Sovngarde to devour one's soul, as his ability seems to replicate how soul trap spells work. Only reasonable explanation I could think of, apart from people of Skyrim having plot armor, is that Alduin found this activity extremely boring and couldn't be bothered with bullying mere mortals.
Well, in any case, as Dragonborn emerges, he's in a hurry as now his comrades can be killed by a mortal, not for cash money. And if it weren't for the very convenient turn of events, Dragonborn would have never found out about Dragonrend's shout. If Alduin was seriously smart, he could have attacked Dragonborn at basically any time. Since he is invincible while in the air, Dragonborn couldn't have been able to really do anything. In fact, the easiest spot to kill him would have been at Kyne's Grove, as at this point of time, Dragonborn was still severely underpowered to what he is at a later point in the game, and would have been forced to fight 2 dragons at once. Now this obviously didn't happen, as if it did, we wouldn't have a game at our hands. And what's the fun in that? Besides, dragons seemingly tend to have a superiority complex of sorts. They consider themselves as a superior race to any other race inhabiting Nirn, so in their minds, there is no way that a mortal being the likes of Dorotheen could ever defeat them. Alduin being the strongest of them all and having an ability to literally destroy the world. Cannot even imagine being challenged by someone who disgracefully carries the name of Dova. Hence why he only decided to fight Dragonborn at a later time in the game. Alright, now that covered, why does Alduin even want to destroy the world to begin with? To solve his ever-ending hunger? The game gives no real reason to explain Alduin's motives, other than just to make him evil for the sake of being evil. Which is kind of a shame, since not only does that make him quite a shallow villain, but that also forces me to guess many things. My guess is that since he was banished from his role of being the ruler of Mundus, he decided to avenge those who were treacherous of his rule by wiping the entire mortal plane from existence and remaking it so that he could once more be their leader. And he has to do this because he is the World Eater, and if you're a World Eater you need to eat worlds, get it? Another guess is what I mentioned earlier. At first he planned to rule the world and then was defeated by the last Dragonborn, so in order to avoid defeat he would destroy the world out of spite to defeat the last Dragonborn. Both of these explanations are extremely petty and make him seem way weaker than what he actually is supposed to be. It wouldn't even surprise me if this wasn't the actual Alduin, or if Alduin never even had the title of the World Eater to begin with, and this whole thing was just a myth started by the Nords. Yet this fraud and fake Alduin took the real World Eater's place and pretended to be one. Nonetheless, Alduin heavily underestimated the last Dragonborn, since if he were to assume that this is the Alduin, he never came across mortals with strong affinity to Tomb back in his days, well, apart from Mirak, I guess. And his arrogance is probably an attempt to give him a character flaw, but it still isn't enough to give him a strong motive for his actions. Did Alduin adapt sense of arrogance from being treated as a god of sorts, or from him being Akatosh's first creation? I suppose we will never know for sure, and due to us not knowing, to me and probably many others, he is the most average evil archetype you will find in fiction. Besides, it often seems that Alduin's fate was written in stone long before his return, as if it was always meant to happen. It is extremely convenient that the first publicly cited Dragonborn since the death of Martin Septim happens to be in Skyrim at the moment of emergency. It is also outright hilarious that it was Alduin who saved his eventual slayer from imminent death. It is as if gods didn't want to see the world end, since if Alduin were to devour it, their top-notch entertainment of watching men and mer fight it out would cease to exist for countless years. Or perhaps Dragonborn is just nature's answer that had to exist to balance out Alduin's everlasting hunger. A beam of light to open up people's roads in complete darkness. Well, regardless, after finding out that Draco is in fact the last Dragonborn of Legends, we require knowledge on a specific shout that could help us in defeating Alduin. Since Alduin is the strongest of all dragons and essentially immortal, there are barely any methods to bring him down, other than to use the exact shout Nordic ancestors used to put Alduin on the ground so they could then trap him in a time wound with the Elder Scroll. After speaking with the Greybeards and Paarthurnax, it becomes immediately clear that Dragonrend is not an ordinary shout. The Greybeards consider it evil even, since it was used to bring down the terror of dragons. See, Dragonrend is seemingly the only tomb to ever be invented by bare humans, tongues to be more precise. That got me thinking, How? Based on lore explanation, Kinnared summoned Paarthurnax to teach mortals the way of the voice so that they have a weapon against Alduin. But Hakon One Eye, Gormlade Goldenhilt and Feldir the Old were never once with dragon blood. This isn't communicated that well in the game itself, since all of them are seemingly capable in the way of the voice, but none of them are dragonborns in flesh. It is rather that their skills showcase the bare human limit on how they can learn dragon language and use it to their advantage. But if you have natural capability to speak in dragon language, does that automatically mean that one with a tongue has similar skills to dragonborn, other than that they cannot devour dragons' soul? Well, seemingly not, but I guess we will never get an answer to this question.
Well, regardless, does natural affinity to the voice give one an ability to create a completely new shout from scratch that not even dragons themselves could think of creating? Now, of course, the natural answer is yes. For instance, English isn't my native language. Itse asiassa mä puhun suomea yleisesti, koska mä oon suomalainen.
But it isn't stopping me from speaking English right now, right? And that wouldn't stop me from creating new words if I so chose to. Let's see here. If we have a video game that was poorly written but was globally considered one of the best games of all time, let me call it a Skyrimized video game. The same sentiment applies. If some Nords learned the language of dragons, then of course they could use it to come up with new sentences that weren't used by dragons themselves. But Dragonrend just happens to go against regular dragon kind, as it brings a dragon down from the sky so that they can experience mortality. Mere mortals found a way to exploit dragons' own language. They didn't have thousands of years to master the language, yet were able to create essentially a perfect way to combat any dragon. Not only that, they could use the dragon language to launch an efficient shout that has never been used before, and to create success. To initiate an efficient shout, it seems almost too convenient to be true. But let's face it, Dragonrend is essentially a Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina is a term that is used when writers come up with a problem so difficult to solve that they have to come up with a bullshit plot device to recover their script from their horrendous writing. This term is often misused by media critics since it is easy to explain inconsistencies in a story with writers pull the Deus Ex Machina excuse, rather than actually using time and effort to explain whether something is possible via existing lore or not. So, I shall go in depth with this conversation. Is Dragonrend a plausible shout within the Elder Scrolls franchise's lore and with the existing information that we have gathered? Yes, certainly. After all, these three warriors that invented the shout also happen to be the ones that Paarthurnax first taught the tomb to. But even if it was possible, this opens up plenty of questions that are probably better left unanswered. However, I shall try anyway. Firstly, it is clear that the Way of the Voice is a pathway to many abilities that some consider to be unnatural. In the end, it utilizes the language of dragons, and in Tamriel, dragon language is just one of the many different languages available to pretty much anyone. This seems to be the case, since these three warriors, tongues to be precise, were able to harness the dragon language to create a completely new shout that even mighty dragons fear. Since humans could field it, it seems the tomb is just a magical power that dragons are natural with. This means that essentially anyone that has been taught the language can unleash essentially any shout imaginable, although ones with the blood of Dova can handle it naturally. This also explains why Firebreath Shout doesn't burn Dragonborn's insides as he unleashes the shout, since shouts behave like magic. Alright, well, if dragon language is one of the many languages in the world, then what prevents humans from creating new dragon shouts, for instance? And if a specific word doesn't exist, then why not just create a new one? Is there a specific rule that you cannot create new words for a dragon language? Is Paarthurnax regulating this? Who knows? I mean, seriously, what is stopping dragon language from gaining new words? English gets new words like riz and guat all the time. Why not the dragon language? Surely you could create a shout for any situation. Want to upgrade your clothes from commoner status to a royal status? Use Juvun Ahtid. Want a divorce from your partner? Use Golway Throne. Do you want to reflect on your heinous actions? Use Fik Vokultrech. For all we know, Dragonrend is seemingly the only shout to ever be invented by humans. Why is this the case? It is only natural for humankind to experiment with the power given to them. It is rather weird to me that there are no new clever shouts invented by humans after Dragonrend was implemented. But nah, it is almost like this game's writers didn't think in depth about the situation they implemented, as they didn't expect that people like me would find hidden flaws in them and nitpick about them on YouTube over 10 years later. This is also why I would consider the whole shout as a deus ex machina, since by removing the whole shout and anything built around it from the game, Alduin wins and Dragonborn's journey becomes irrelevant. Secondly, in order to even gain access to Dragonrend, Dragonborn has to acquire an Elder Scroll, more precisely the exact Elder Scroll that was used to trap Alduin onto the Time Wound, as otherwise Dragonborn cannot look into the past and see Dragonrend used in action. And this is where we have few problems again, since not only are Elder Scrolls the namesake for the series, they are also mysterious artifacts that may or may not exist to begin with. And even if they were real, there is no way of knowing if one can be found from Skyrim. Fortunately for Dragonborn, there is an Elder Scroll at Black Reach. There is a catch though. If someone were to use an Elder Scroll, they could experience symptoms like blindness and insanity, which could turn out to be permanent. The Elder Scrolls' reader has to be dedicated and powerful enough to withstand its strong side effects. Conveniently, Dragonborn doesn't have any of those side effects. Imagine if Dragonborn went insane or just lost his eyesight from getting flashbanged from reading the Elder Scroll, but no, he can read it at this very precise spot. How brilliant! And once Dragonborn sees Dragonrend used on Alduin, he immediately masters Dragonrend. What an incredible level of listening comprehension. So yeah, Elder Scroll is yet another mysterious MacGuffin that the protagonist needs to get their hands on so they can stop the bad guy. Or more specifically, Dragonrend Shout itself is a MacGuffin. Let me explain. In order to obtain the main MacGuffin, you first need to obtain the side MacGuffin, that being the Elder Scroll, so that you can get access to the Dragonrend Shout. Yeah, it's nauseating. Essentially, MacGuffins are a commonplace in storytelling. They are items that can drive the story forward in various different ways. For instance, Sauron's ring from The Lord of the Rings is a MacGuffin. After all, Frodo's journey is all about destroying the very ring that is moving the story forward. But it is also the item that the story revolves around. Frodo needs to destroy the ring to defeat Sauron. This is the plot of the whole series, so it doesn't come across as weird or sudden when Frodo finally destroys the ring. Yet the story is enhanced with the subplot where the ring starts corrupting Frodo, just like it corrupted its earlier owners, like Gollum. The question whether Frodo can actually resist the ring's power is left open till the very end, and it is also something that was hinted at from the very beginning. This, combined with his relationship with Sam and Gollum, is what makes Frodo's journey both interesting and rewarding for the viewer once they witness the end. Because guess what? I enjoy watching stories filled with characters that grow both emotionally and physically throughout the story. And as I stated earlier, the ring was established as a plot point from the very beginning. There are several different plot points going on, which eventually lead to events such as the Battle of Minas Tirith happening. However, they all happened due to the ring's existence, as well as due to Frodo's very journey to destroy the ring. The difference is that in Skyrim, Alduin's might is already very established in both the game and lore, but Elder Scroll is brought to the story out of nowhere in order for Dragonborn to gain access to the Dragonrend Shout. Considering how lucky it was for the Dragonborn to find the very MacGuffin with such low odds, I can't really think of this circumstance as anything else than a good old Deus Ex Machina. Although coming back to MacGuffins, I personally really dislike them. I see them as a lazy way for a writer to navigate themselves out of tough writing situations without having a need to utilize creative writing tricks that could amaze the reader with how clever they are. And MacGuffins are usually extremely predictable, as everything in the story often revolves around the item. At worst, multiple entities are chasing after the MacGuffin, turning the story into a cliché-filled hunting story where two sides, often portrayed as good and evil, are looking for an item that can either save or destroy the world depending on its use. These chase scenes are often packed full with brainless action and idiotic decision making in the heat of a moment. This can easily kill an otherwise entertaining story, since such plot points are usually put ahead of character development and other forms of proper story progression methods. The problem here lies that in order to defeat the main bad, Alduin in this case, the main character needs the overly powerful item that may or may not exist, otherwise the world is doomed.
Right, Elder Scroll. Dragon in brackets.
Out of the story, and suddenly Alduin wins, as there is no other saving grace for Tamriel.
Additionally, you can also write Dragonrend out of the story and Alduin still wins.
Do you see the issue here? In conclusion, an Elder Scroll is a MacGuffin that is required for the story to move forward, although I must add that in my personal opinion, the Elder Scroll is probably the best way to execute the story, as it not only evokes the "Oh my god, it's the thing from the series' title" effect, but also imagine how disappointing it would have been if the Dragonborn had learned Dragonrend from the most average, plant-looking book imaginable.
But the whole MacGuffin debacle isn't the only thing that turns the entire main storyline of Skyrim into a pile of coincidences.
Dragonborn just happens to be saved from certain death by Alduin himself. He is conveniently forced to fetch the exact item Delphine needs to determine Alduin's parting, despite the whole reasoning for Farengar sending Draco out on an expedition to Bleak's Falls Barrow being outright idiotic. This guy didn't even know whether the Dragonstone was real or not, yet he forces a complete stranger who was just almost killed by Imperials to do his bidding. Regardless. Later on, Dragonborn and the Blades come across exposition dump known as Alduin's Wall, which leads players to Septimus, who thankfully knows exactly where the Elder Scroll in brackets dragon is located. This opens up the whole Dragonrend saga, as the Elder Scroll is needed for this very specific circumstance. And later down the line, Dragonborn gets a free dragon ticket to Skuldafn, even though that place was meant to be inaccessible via regular mortals. I mean, isn't it just very lucky that Dragonborn happens to be at the right place at the right time awfully often? Well, anyway, I'm not claiming that I would be a better writer than anyone at the Bethesda Studios. However, in my personal opinion, the best writing option would have been to erase Dragonrend from existence, since as we just explored, it causes significantly more questions on top of more questions. Perhaps the original writers could have weakened Alduin to the point where he is defeatable via regular means and not by some supernatural bullshit. I also feel like these writers should have spent more time on developing Alduin as a character, perhaps giving him a proper personality, as at this point he's just one-dimensional villain with no real motive. He's just evil for sake of being evil. And that's not very memorable now, is it? But golly gee, they can't change him, because then they wouldn't have a generic bad guy for their generic story, and any type of change could just turn him into a laughingstock. Not that he isn't one already. I mean, seriously, they can't portray Alduin, someone who was formerly worshipped as a god, to be a weak opponent. Bethesda, a small indie studio, needs the definitely not generic bad guy for their each game. If stakes weren't amped up in every installment, how else would they sell their games? You're saying that they should just write a good story with a bad guy that has a good reason to commit acts that they do? Don't make me laugh. Just slap a grandiose, new, unique, spectacular, prestigious, remarkable, evil final boss onto the game and ship it. I mean, who cares if the character is likable? Who cares if the character is memorable? It's all about how epic the character is now, is it? I mean, I can't even blame them for this. After all, he is supposed to be the world eater. What you gonna do about someone who can eat worlds? As I said, maybe they should have just made Alduin, less strong. But, I'm not a writer. I'm just a good old storyteller. But at the end of it all, even with my suggested fix, Skyrim's main quest would have been extremely underwhelming. That is due to how it is extremely predictable in the way it represents itself. It follows your traditional Chosen One story that you can find from any popular media like Star Wars and Harry Potter. The hero or heroine is a nobody who, by a straight miracle and sometimes even hard work, becomes tangled in a world-threatening crisis. At some point throughout the story, it is established that MC, the main character, is actually a pretty important figure, being part of a prophecy that has foretold MC's role in saving the world from destruction. The hero typically acquires superpowers or some sort of magical power during their journey, deciding to embrace their destiny by defeating the bad guys to ensure the world's safety. Usually the bad guy tends to have an ace up their sleeve, so that is when the hero utilizes their wit, talents, MacGuffin, and of course power of friendship to overcome the bad guy and to save the world. Does this sound familiar?
Dragonborn being the Chosen One.
The Chosen One formula isn't inherently bad. The problem lies in its tendency to not innovate enough, making it indistinct from other entries in the Chosen One genre.
Skyrim unfortunately being one of those.
And if other aspects of the story were good, I could let this slide, but Skyrim's story is so painfully predictable that I just can't forgive.
Not only is it predictable, it is also very forgettable.
There are seriously not many positive things to say about it, which is why this video has become increasingly negative throughout its runtime. Bethesda are brilliant at creating immersive worlds with unique NPCs, amazing lore and beautiful worlds that just draw players in for hundreds of hours, but they aren't the best at creating engaging stories. Most quests in Skyrim heavily rely on NPCs assigning the Dragonborn tasks that involve fetching items, that essentially is just doing the dirty work for them, since Dragonborn is a silent video game protagonist, and if players weren't given anything to do, the game would feel shallow and boring to play. Who cares if it makes no sense that we are the one forced to deliver news of the discovery made in Sartal to the Archmage, or that we are the person assigned to provide the jagged crown to the chosen war leader? It gives something for the player to do. Essentially, the player's character is used as a device to move the story forward. Our character isn't an actual being with our own thoughts and feelings. You are meant to do exactly as ordered, and that is that. Which, as you can imagine, is not the best thing to happen in a role-playing game. This is amplified by a million throughout the main quest. Since you are the last Dragonborn, it is now your destiny to stop Alduin. If you won't do it, no one else can.
Which, by the way, is just wrong. It was just prophesied that the Dragonborn would be the one to do it. But anyone could stop Alduin, and we will get to that later. Don't you worry.
But even though you're the one with power, you are forced to listen to these absolute peasants, since without their input on each matter, the story cannot move forward. This is inherently a problem with Skyrim's overworld nature. You can decide to do whatever you please and complete any quest at any pace you choose to. This can lead to huge narrative dissonance, where Alduin just idly waits for Dragonborn to progress in the story before freeing his fellow comrades from dragon burial sites. Of course, this gives you some benefits as a player, since if you do not fight against Milmulnir at Whiterun's Watchtower, you won't meet that many dragons throughout the game. However, once you actually beat Milmulnir, you start to meet dragons all over Skyrim, which can actually hold you back, as you can face them physically at any time. Or how Alduin patiently waits for Dragonborn to find the Elder Scroll before attempting to murder him. There is no real sense of emergency throughout the whole game, which applies to both Dragon Crisis and Civil War. Which makes me beg a question. Why should I care about these things if seemingly no one else cares either? Yeah, NPCs can mention how the world has gone crazy, but they are nothing else than just background noise meant to fill the void. There is no real interactivity or freedom of choice anywhere in the game. Yeah, you can sometimes decide on some factors like whether you kill Paarthurnax or not, or if you decide to dismantle Dark Brotherhood instead of joining them, but they are hidden under extremely linear story progression and created in a way which provides the player an illusion of choice. In reality, it doesn't matter who you select, as you are still following someone else's orders. You aren't actually deciding on your own. Your character is a silent protagonist meant to do exactly as said. If they don't do as said, the story cannot progress. You aren't actually role-playing anything if you don't have a true freedom to roleplay each thing you wanted to do. You're playing as a lawfully good character but want to destroy the Dark Brotherhood? Too bad, you still need to kill Krell the Kind. After killing Astrid, Penitus Oculadus is telling you to destroy the Falkreed Sanctuary. Your character is just an average person, but they are meant to kill several members of the Brotherhood on their own. Penitus Oculadus, a company with several trained soldiers meant to protect the Emperor, cannot be arsed to do it themselves, as the player needs to experience the destruction of the Dark Brotherhood by their own hands. You're purposely sent to do adventure work, but if you weren't ordered so, other characters could take away your glory. Alternatively, you are sent away so that other NPCs can do stuff out of camera view. For instance, when Delphine seemingly visited all dragon burial sites to see which dragons Alduin had revived so far. We just have to accept that Delphine did this, even though there is no evidence of her actually doing so. We just need to take her word for it. Although, once again, I must remind you that this isn't necessarily the worst thing, as Skyrim is a video game, and if these NPCs didn't give quests for player to follow, the game would be painfully boring to play. But I personally don't like how Skyrim's main quest implemented it, as it takes a lot of freedom out of players' hands, and just makes it extremely linear and predictable. The problem comes in once you realize that Bethesda solely relies on this type of linear storytelling. It becomes painfully obvious while replaying the game, since it happens over and 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 over. Oh damn, my bad. I was trapped in a limbo talking about a game with messy writing. Where were we again? Wait, it's already May? Okay, let me cook real quick. After defeating Alduin, he retreats to Sovngarde to regain his strength. But Dragonborn doesn't know this, so Paarthurnax recommends him to capture one of Alduin's comrades to gain intel on Alduin's whereabouts. One very tedious peace conference later, Dragonborn gains Jarl of Whiteruns's acceptance to trap a dragon at Dragon's Reach. Dragon's Reach was originally built in purpose to trap a dragon inside it, and was then later repurposed as Jarl's Palace. That being said, it still has the capability of trapping a full-sized dragon. Dragonborn, with his clever tactics, successfully traps Alduin's right-hand dragon in Dragon's Reach. This is where I would argue that this dragon was quite dumb for falling into such a cheap trick, but he explains that he was quite intrigued on seeing Dragonborn's tomb in action. Odawin, surprisingly, is quite cooperative, saying that many of his kind have grown suspicious of Alduin's reign and are debating whether his tomb is actually the greatest. Apparently Alduin has escaped to Sovngarde, and the only way for a mortal to access that place is via a portal present at Skuldafn. The problem, of course, being that Skuldafn is far away and isn't accessible to travelers. Bravely, Dragonborn releases Odawing, who flies him all the way to Skuldafn, a place that is infested with strong Draugr and dragon priests. But as a Dragonborn, Draco easily navigates through the dungeon and jumps into the portal. Although it seems quite strange that such a portal exists in the first place. I know it was built with Alduin in mind, but it still doesn't explain how it was built. How do you build something that portals you into afterlife? It's just kind of weird to think about. Anyway, Dragonborn emerges at Sovngarde, where Alduin is eating souls of mortals at any chance he gets. Gaining access to Hall of Valor, we meet up with those three warriors that once fought against Alduin at Throne of the World. How convenient that this exact trio happened to be here. I had imagined that Sovngarde would be full of several Nordic heroes, yet it only has a handful of them. It kinda would have been cool to fight alongside former High Kings of Skyrim, but I guess that's not happening. I do understand why it's not happening, as it's symbolic that these three get to fight against Alduin once more, but you know, the potential was there. Well, regardless, how does Sovngarde's afterlife work precisely? Each dead person has a physical mass and is able to exercise similar brain function as a living person. Alright, why is Feldir the Old? Well, old. Other two are also the same age as they were during their fight against Alduin, yet Jürgen Windkoller is like 30 to 40 years old. Can each person just select which form they take in the afterlife? Is it chosen based on how they were at death, or how they look like at their most heroic moment? I would imagine it's the latter, since Feldir the Old was quite old when he gained access to the Way of the Voice. But yeah, I personally find it strange that people in the afterlife can have mass to begin with. When the battle with Alduin begins, our brave trio can harm him just fine as if they were alive. But Alduin is alive with his own flesh, so why can't someone who's literally dead harm him? Is it that when you're in afterlife, your flesh turns into something similar to how the dead people have it on Sovngarde? This is never really explained in the game. And also, if mortals can enter Sovngarde and interact with dead people, then why can't dead people? Oh, it is not allowed? Ah, I see. What? As it turns out, Alduin was indeed using the Civil War in his plans. This is something that Thalmor had been suspecting, but they probably didn't expect that Alduin had purposely been killing people in order to eat their souls. Sure, it was a pure coincidence that Alduin spawned right when Ulfric was about to get executed, but Skyrim's little Civil War brought constant victims of war to Sovngarde, where Alduin could have a nice little dinner. Alduin directly gains power from the souls of mortals, which is required for him to devour Mundus. The Civil War helps in this nicely. Or, well, I would believe that if some of those fights were actually shown on screen, but of course they weren't. So, Dragonborn and 3 Nordic warriors defeat Alduin in an extremely underwhelming final boss fight. The immortal creation of Avatage has perished. However, something noteworthy is that Dragonborn doesn't devour Alduin's soul, and Alduin's body doesn't stay in Sovngarde. Instead, it vanishes, leaving nothing behind. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it! We achieved absolutely nothing! Just like last time, Alduin's plan to devour all of the human plane was just rescheduled. Let me explain. Since Dragonborn didn't devour Alduin's soul, he can still technically be reborn. Of course, without Alduin, the current dragon threat has been resolved, as if dragons refuse to follow Paarthurnax's teaching, Dragonborn could just kill any of them and take their souls. Even if some of them were left after Dragonborn's passing, without Alduin, they cannot be revived. So brave warriors could still kill dragons normally without having to be scared of their resurrection. However, no physical evidence of Alduin's death was left behind. If there is one thing that we know about today's entertainment industry, it is that when a company needs money, they won't even hesitate to bring back dead characters for some cheap nostalgia pandering. And even if a character was written off as actually properly no joke no cap for real dead, even that won't stop retcons from happening, especially since in this case, the prophecy could still take place in a later date. Besides, you can just say that this wasn't actually the World Eater the fuss was about. So yeah, for now, Alduin isn't actually dead and will return in Elder Scrolls X as a pre-order bonus Day 1 DLC.
Say the line, Bart!
Somehow Alduin returned.
And was Dragonborn even needed for this fight? Probably not. It's really hard to say, it is just that the prophecy said that the last Dragonborn would face Alduin. It never said anything about killing Alduin. But was Dragonborn needed to kill Alduin? Not really. And as per usual, prophecies are just prophecies. They may happen or they may not happen, even in the fantasy world. So yeah, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim hasn't aged that well. Bethesda is great at delivering immersive worlds rich in lore, but struggle to deliver reasonable stories within their own custom environments. Skyrim's main quest is filled with all types of plot contrivances as well as just poor writing choices. Most of it can be summed up as your player character having to constantly fetch different types of items to other NPCs without giving the player control to have anything to say in what they're supposed to do. This generally leads to a tediously linear way of storytelling, which can work in narrative-driven games just fine if you as the player are put into the game as if it was a movie of sorts. Good examples are games like The Last of Us and Uncharted that provide options to the player in a way of approaching gameplay. However, they stay linear in their storytelling. People love these games due to their well-written stories. Who could have thought? There isn't anything inherently wrong with Skyrim being a linear story. Far from it. There are some quests in the game that, while linear, work quite well with environmental storytelling in mind, as well as with interesting characters that we get to follow. Skyrim's main quest isn't one of those, and it struggles with both dated tropes and ways of storytelling that just makes it a very undesirable part of the game, hence why players often either skip it entirely or leave it as a last thing to do in their playthroughs. Not only that, Bethesda first and foremost loves money and absolutely hates their fans, as became evident with their new evil monetization scheme that they implemented onto Skyrim Special Edition while I was making this very video. As I stated in my previous video where I discussed stealth AI in numerous different games,
I said that I feel worried for the future of Bethesda Studios, as I refuse to believe that fans would suck up another shallow game like this ever again. After the release of Skyrim, Bethesda has similarly screwed up their main quests in Fallout 4 and Starfield, often making them irrelevant and boring parts of the game, which is exactly what happened with Skyrim. Only one can hope that they will improve in their way of telling stories in the upcoming Elder Scrolls 6. But let's face it, they won't.
Well, I don't think that this video was perfect in representing everything that Skyrim's main quest had to offer, since there's so much that I could talk about, and if I were to talk about every single nitpick that I could find, this video would be like 10 hours long. Besides, there are hundreds or even thousands of different Skyrim critiques all over YouTube, and I even assume that some points that I repeated here have already been said hundreds of times, so it would be quite difficult to make an entertaining video if I were to just nitpick every single detail that I could find. Am I right? But yeah, that was precisely why I didn't go in depth about any other storyline in the game other than the main quest and Civil War. However, if you would like me to make a video where I go through every single side quest in the game and doing it in a very analytical format, except the Anniversary Edition, I'm never touching that, please let me know down in the comments. Although no promises, since this video already took me like a year to make.
But for now, I hope you all enjoyed this short video. Happy New Year's everyone, I know it's quite late, but regardless, thanks for watching and listening.